So let's go back to that psalm that was read for us, Psalm 31. I appreciate Gary reading that for us this morning. I really appreciate Thomas, too, with the forethought he put into his songs this morning in focusing very intently upon those things that we'll be looking at. In Psalm 31, verses 21 through 24 is the verses that were read, but I want to back up to verses 1 and 2. Here the psalmist says in Psalm 31, verses 1 and 2, "In you, O Lord, I put my trust. Let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in your righteousness. Bow down your ear to me. Deliver me speedily. Be my rock of refuge, a fortress of defense to save me." So when David starts this particular psalm, and you think about, okay, so what would David have been going through that he would make this appeal to God? And what are the kinds of things he would be facing? And also, how would David actually be feeling as he's going through these things? And I think one verse that really sums it up well is when you go down to verse 9. Psalm 31 verse 9 says, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I am in trouble. My eyes waste away with grief, yes, my soul and my body." I think there are many in this audience who could probably sympathize with what David says there. God, have mercy on me because I am in trouble. I need you to help me. I need you to be my rock. I need for you to be my defense. I need you to show me the way out of this trouble that I have found myself in. David in this particular Psalms talks about all the different enemies that have laid traps for him and how it is that there are those who want to destroy him. In this world that we live in, there's many things that feel that way. Some of those things, when you think about some of these things which will distract us from being able to go to God and focusing on God and knowing that God is our help, one of them that's very simple is just something like money. Money is one of those things that we know that we need and that we have to have. And it's not that money is everything, but money helps you do a lot of things. And without money, there's a lot of things you can't do. But as Jesus said in Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21, and you remember this account that there's a young man who comes to Jesus, and he tells Jesus, "Tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And this is right in the middle of when Jesus is teaching about a lot of different things. And so Jesus looks at this man and says, "Who made me an arbitrator between you and your brother?" Why are you interrupting? Why are you losing focus on what I'm talking about to be concerned about this inheritance that you want from your brother? And so what Jesus goes on to point out here in Luke 12, verses 13 through 21, if I can get there, Luke 12, 13 through 21, notice verse 15, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of things that he possesses." One of the lessons that Jesus tries to teach here is that when we get distracted by something that is an important issue, money is very important. If a man doesn't take care of his own family, he's worse than an infidel. A man is supposed to lay up an inheritance for his children and his children's children. A man is supposed to use the money that he has for the glory of God by helping others with those things. Let someone who used to steal, let him steal no longer, that he may work with his own hands and provide for those who are in need, right? We know that in Matthew 25 that there are many people who can be aided with these things. But if we lose focus on what money is really supposed to be about, we turn into this particular man. And what it gives way to is things like covetousness, greediness. We become lazy about spiritual matters. We're like a man who had this tremendous excess. He had prospered so much with his crops that he said, I'm in a hard situation now. What am I supposed to do now? I mean, the only thing left for me is I've got to tear my barns down and build bigger so I have a place to store all this stuff that I have now. Oh, what a trouble I'm in. But then he says to his soul, you have things laid up for a lot of years. Take your ease. Eat, drink, and be merry. And we forget the bigger obligations. You fool, this night your soul is required of you. And so Jesus says don't lose focus on those things that are most important. Money is not only one of those things, but think about the media and all the things that go on in the world today. We've heard the expression that if it bleeds, it leads. And when you turn on the television, that's all you see. We're told in the world today that there is no common ground between anyone. Everybody that you see around you is your enemy. They're trying to take advantage of you. They're trying to take something from you. They have something that ought to be yours. It's not fair. This is unwise. This is unrighteous. This is unjust. All these different things. And so when you see the TV and the media, that's what's there. And you know that brethren are losing focus because what are brethren doing? They're echoing the very same thing that's being said on the television. And because of that, we lose focus on things that are most important. Jeremiah 9 and verse 2. Jeremiah said, "Oh, that I had in the wilderness a lodging place for travelers, that I might leave my people and go from them, for they are all adulterers, an assembly of treacherous men." And when you look at the media and you look at even some things that brethren say and post on social media, you feel the same way. You know, I just wish I had a place that I could just fly away and give away from all of them, because anything that you see around you, there's nothing but adulterers, there's nothing but unrighteous people around me. And I just soon get away from them. But we lose focus on what's most important. We get distracted and even discouraged by it. We have things in the world like our relationships that are very important to us. But even Jesus said in Matthew 10 and verse 36 that a man's enemies will be those of his own household. That Jesus said he knew by the things that he taught and by his very being that it would bring a sword even into a person's very own home. And some of these relationships that we have, not just with family members, but with friends. You remember that Jesus was betrayed by Judas coming to him and giving him a kiss. And so even by those who seem to be our closest companions are those who may actually betray us. But again, it causes us to lose focus and to be distracted and even discouraged when even those who are the most closest comrades are the ones who turn their backs on us. False teachers, Sean in his lessons on the Sermon on the Mount talked about how it is we're supposed to be walking this narrow pathway. But along that narrow pathway, you remember that Jesus said that there are going to be false teachers who are wolves dressed in sheep's clothing. Don't be distracted. Don't get off that narrow path by listening to these false teachers. And you remember how it was in 1 Kings 19 and verse 4 that he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and he came and sat down under a broom tree. And Elijah prayed that he might die. And he said, "It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." It's easy when you look at examples such as this, and there's many others, and there's many other things that can cause these problems. It's easy to see that our life is going to be filled with them. So how do we overcome? How do we move past it? How do we just absolutely refuse to be discouraged? Because I think that's really at the heart of how it is, and I think that's what Jesus had to go through when he decided that he was never going to give in. If you feel like David did in that psalm that was read, "Lord, have mercy on me because I am in trouble," I think here's where you need to start. You need to absolutely refuse to give in. I do believe it's going to be a matter of your will aligning with the Lord's will. But you have to indeed get your will in line with the Lord's. Because the Lord has said for you to not give up and to not give in. So you must agree with that and confess the same thing. Because the Lord is my rock, because the Lord is my refuge, I'm not going to give in. You remember in Matthew 26, as Jesus is there in the garden, he's needing his disciples to stay awake with him. He asked them to watch and pray. Watch with me. And so Jesus goes and he starts praying. And he prays that if there be any other way than this, let it be. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. And Jesus is saying, if there is another way, let it be that way. And then when he comes to his disciples, the ones that he has asked, please watch with me. Be alert, strengthen me, encourage me during this time. They're sleeping. And he says, could you not even stay awake for an hour? I need you at this particular moment of time. And he goes and he prays again. He comes back, he finds them sleeping once again. And he tells them they need to watch and pray. They need to watch and pray because the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And you're going to give in to it if you're not careful. And when the soldiers finally come to arrest Jesus, they all flee. And he's there alone. But Jesus refused to give in. Jesus was going to do what it was that the Father had sent him to do. And even if it meant death itself, Christ was not going to quit. Brethren, that's the kind of doggedness that we're supposed to have. That no matter what it is that we're facing, we're not going to give in. Paul had it as well. You remember as Paul is talking about all those things that could be gained to him in Philippians 3. He says this in Philippians 3. Not that I've already attained, this is verse 12, not that I already attained or am already perfected, but I press on, that I may lay hold of that for which Christ Jesus has also laid hold of me. Brethren, I do not count myself to have apprehended, but one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forward to those things which are ahead. I press toward the goal of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Paul said, I press. Brethren, each day is about pressing. And though we might look upon the money issues that we may or may not have, whether we've got a little or a lot, we might look at the relationships that cause us difficulties in this world, well, maybe even those of our own household become our enemies. We look at the things that are going on in the world around us. It's always coming through on our television and our Facebook posts and everything else and Twitter and everything else that's going on. And we see all these different things. And then we come amongst God's people and we hear things that are false, that are not right, that God did not say, or they're twisting the things that our Lord has directed. And instead of giving in to those things, and instead of quitting, and instead of finding an excuse then to sit back and not do anything, refuse to give in. Refuse to quit. Make it your absolute aim, as Proverbs 24 and verse 10 reminds us. Proverbs 24 verse 10 says this, that if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. If when trouble comes, you fall, you faint, you falter, you hesitate, you stop, your strength is small. That is scary. Because there's been so many times there when many of these things that I listed on that first page come up, it's easy for me to say, what are we doing? We're just spinning our wheels, it feels like. Well, if I faint in that day, my strength was small. So, brethren, don't quit and don't give in. A thing that will help you in that day is to keep your eye on what's really most important. In Hebrews 12, as we spoke about Jesus in the garden just a few moments ago, Jesus had something in mind as he prayed to God that gave him strength. In Hebrews 12, verse 1, it says, therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that's set before us. Again, don't give in and don't give up. Look to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, and notice what it was that Jesus focused on. Who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Brethren, if our God, if Jesus, as he was facing his most difficult moment, an excruciating, agonizing death on the cross, if Jesus needed and Jesus focused on the joy that was going to be on the other side of that horrible event, and he used that as his source of strength, why should we not also? Why should we not also look at that joy? Why should we not also use what's on the other side of this thing? I can push through whatever it is because I know what's waiting for me. And I know what's waiting for me because I know who has already done it and who is already there, who bids me come to him and will welcome me when I arrive. Why should I not also look at that joy that's set before me? This is what Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 4 in verses 16 through 18. Paul says this, therefore we do not lose heart. Even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory, while we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. We have so much more waiting for us that we can keep our eye on. So stay active. Jesus said in John 9, verse 4, that he must work the works of him who sent me while it is the day. The night is coming when no one could work. You remember that when Peter went to the house of Cornelius, and as he preached about Jesus in Acts 10, he said Jesus was a man who went about doing good. I think the reason that a lot of Christians become so distracted and so discouraged is we sit down and we do nothing but play things out in our heads. And we spend too much time there instead of actually being active. Actually doing something about the situation we find ourselves in. Our mind has a way of only telling us the worst possible scenario, instead of actually being engaged in an act of faith. God says he will be your rock. He will be your sustainer. That God will guide you through the things that you're facing. Walk by faith and be active in doing it. Be steadfast, be immovable, be always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. 1 Corinthians 15:58. That's a verse that we know so well, that you've heard quoted so very many times. But when's the last time I actually told myself, you know what I need to do? I need to get up. I need to stop worrying about all the stuff that I'm seeing. Maybe I need to turn it off and go out here and start doing some of these things that I know will make a difference. Because I know that if I'm working what our God has told us to do, that it's not going to be in vain. It's going to accomplish what God has seen fit for it to accomplish. And so we need to stay active. And along the way, as we are being active, we need to be praying. That Jesus so many times in His life was engaged in prayer. In Luke 5 and verse 16, it says that He often withdrew in the wilderness and prayed. Jesus needed time where He was going to be alone. That He was going to be able to speak to the Father and know that the Father heard Him. You've heard lessons before, and in classes it talks about some of those events in the life of Christ when He would withdraw to pray, that maybe it was going to be a very, very active day where He was going to be preaching and teaching for an extended period of time and face a lot of different detractors and those who would be wanting to persecute Him. So He spent the night before and the early morning before in prayer. He spent all night in prayer before He chose some of His apostles and those who were going to be teaching and preaching in His name. That Jesus did indeed pray before these great events, but I think even more importantly, Jesus just prayed before the day began. And I think it's a really simple lesson. And that Jesus often withdrew so that He could pray. It's fine for us as we are trying to figure out, what do I need to do? Let one of the first things you need to do be this: I need to go by myself and I need to speak to my Father. And I need to pray for wisdom. I need to pray for guidance. And I need to say, just as David did, Lord, have mercy on me because I am in trouble. And I need You to be my rock. I need You to be my fortress. I want us to go to Psalm 55 and notice some of the things that the psalmist here is praying for. Psalm 55. And notice verse 1. Here the psalmist says, "Give ear to my prayer, O God, and do not hide Yourself from my supplication. Attend to me and hear me. I am restless in my complaint and moan noisily because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they bring down trouble upon me, and in wrath they hate me. My heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling have come upon me, and horror has overwhelmed me. So I said, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Indeed, I would wander far off and remain in the wilderness. I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and the tempest." So David says, "Destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues. For I have seen violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go around it and on its walls. Iniquity and trouble are also in the midst of it. Destruction is in the midst. Oppression and deceit do not depart from its streets. For it is not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me, who has exalted himself against me, then I could hide from him. But it was You, a man my equal, my companion and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together and walked in the house of God in the throne." So David says, let death seize them. Let them go down alive into hell. For wickedness is in their dwellings and among them. As for me, David says, I will call upon God, and the Lord shall save me. Evening and morning and at noon I will pray and cry aloud, and He shall hear my voice. He has redeemed my soul in peace from the battle that was against me. For there were many against me. God will hear and afflict them. Even He who abides from of old, because they do not change, therefore they do not fear God. He has put forth His hand against those who were at peace with Him. He has broken His covenant. The words of His mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in His heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. Verse 22 probably sounds familiar, because in the New Testament we have passages such as 1 Peter 5 and verse 7. "Cast your burden on the Lord, and He shall sustain you. He shall never permit the righteous to be moved." We have a great and glorious God who cares about us. We have a great and glorious God who sees the trouble, who knows what you're going through, knows where it has come from, and our God will avenge so that you don't have to be distracted, and so that you don't have to be discouraged, and so that you don't have to be destroyed. Cast your care upon the Lord. He cares about you. You don't have to pray for deliverance to go off somewhere to where you can hide from all these things. You can stand. And one of the things that helps you to stand is prayer. In Psalm 22, if you'll turn back there, Psalm 22. Let's note verses 1 through 7. I'm sorry, Psalm 17. Psalm 17, 1 through 7. Psalm 17, verses 1 through 7. Hear a just cause, O Lord. Attend to my cry. Give ear to my prayer, which is not from deceitful lips. Let my vindication come from your presence. Let your eyes look on the things that are upright. You have tested my heart. You have visited me in the night. You have tried me and have found nothing. I have purposed that my mouth shall not transgress concerning the works of men. By the word of your lips I have kept away from the paths of the destroyer. Uphold my steps in your paths, that my footsteps may not slip. I have called upon you, for you will hear me, O God. Incline your ear to me and hear my speech. Show your marvelous loving kindness by your right hand, O you who save those who trust in you from those who rise up against them. I would give us a challenge this morning when we think about the power of prayerfulness. I think as Christians we often talk about prayer, and we talk about how much faith and trust that we have in the power of prayer. And yet when we think about the one who prays, and as the psalmist is here talking about, God has examined him, that there's nothing that can be found. And he starts going through certain things like what he has said and what is coming off his lips. I would submit to us and I would challenge us to think about not just what has come off your lips, but what has come off your fingertips as well. We live in a dangerous time, brethren. We live in a time where we forget and we've taken for granted for a long period of time the things that we say, and how gossip and things like that can come off of our mouth. And you've heard the analogies like the feathers out of a pillow, that once those feathers hit the wind, you can never bring them all back in. There's a lot of things that sometimes we say and we do and we type and stuff like that. It can't be brought back. If God were to test your Twitter feed, if God were to test your Facebook feed, if God were to go into your emails and read those emails that you've sent, if He were to go into your text messages and look at those text messages, would God still be willing to hear your prayer of help and deliverance after that? Prayer is powerful, but it's only available to those who God is actually listening to. So again, let us go to our God in prayer, but let us go with a clean heart and a pure conscience. And lastly, thankfulness. One reason that so many people, I believe, become proud and arrogant is because they forget to be thankful about things. The reason so many people can't go to God the way that they should in prayer is because we forget to be thankful. In John 11, verse 41, as Jesus goes to the graveside of Lazarus, and as he prays to God about this event that's about to take place in bringing forth Lazarus from the grave, Jesus takes a moment to pray. And in that prayer to God, he says, I thank you that you hear me. That has always been a statement that has really stood out in my mind. This is God, and this is God in the flesh. This is Jesus who has lived a perfect life. And this is Jesus who has no reason to doubt whatsoever whether or not God is hearing him. And yet he still takes the time to say, thank you for hearing me. If Jesus takes the time to say to God, thank you, then brethren, how much more so should we? How much more so should we? Go to God and just say thank you for things. In Philippians 4, verses 6 through 7, has been pointed out several times as we talk about being anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds, right? We know these verses because they teach us about the secret to not becoming anxious. And one of them is about being thankful. The way in which we get past some of the anxiety of the world and worrying about money issues and worrying about relationship issues and worrying about all these false doctrines in the world is being thankful. God, I thank you that you hear me when I pray to you. God, I thank you that though I may not have as much as others, I have plenty to eat, I have a place to live, I'm fine. I have those around me who are taken care of. Now, God, I should be more thankful for what I have. That though there are a lot of people who are saying false things, I have a lot of people around me who will stand strong for the truth. And though even among my own family I may have those who are departing from the faith, I have so many others who are standing faithful and will not waver. Well, we have so much to be thankful for that we ought to be going to our God and being thankful for them vocally. One last verse, Psalm 30 and verse 5. Psalm 30 and verse 5, it reminds us about the anger of God. Then in Psalm 30 and verse 5 it says, "For his anger is but for a moment, his favor is for life. Weeping may endure for a night, but brethren, joy comes in the morning." That's a beautiful expression. But joy comes in the morning. There may be a lot of things that when we lay our head down tonight that would cause us to be worrying and distracted. But don't give up. Keep your eye on the prize. Make sure that you're going to be active, living your faith, and have your prayer full of thankfulness to your God. And joy will come in the morning. You've got to make it through the night. You've got to make it through the night. So the question I want to leave you with this morning is, are you still on the right path? Jesus has already given this path to us and shown us the way. All we need to do is follow Him. And so if you're not on that path this morning, if you need to come back to it, or maybe you need to be baptized so that your sins can be washed away so that you might start walking that path, there's great strength and honor along that way. And we want to help you in any way that we can. If we can help you this morning, let it be known as together we stand and sing.